Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi and welcome back to That Trippi Show with my co-host Alex Sashlow. This week we have, I think, one of the most important guests we've had on That Trippi Show, and very timely for America's 250th. If you look around at what's happening with the Trump regime, you'd say, we didn't vote for this. What can we do? What's going to happen next? And that's why we've invited Ira Shapiro to join us today. If I introduced him properly, it would take the whole show. His work goes back to working in the U.S. Senate in the 70s, later served as ambassador under Bill Clinton. Today, we're talking about a couple of Ira's projects that include the book, Betrayed, We Didn't Vote for This, and his Common Sense Coalition that I think is really important in terms of what's happening now, how we got here, and what we can all do and need to do to get back on track. Ira, welcome.
Joe, Alex, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
Ira, I wanted to start with the title. And by the way, folks, this is the book, Betrayed, We Didn't Vote for This. I think it says what Democrats ought to be saying every day, that America didn't vote for this. So tell us, if you can go through your take on what we didn't vote for and why it's important to hammer that message.
Well, I think, Joe, we're trying to build a coalition of opposition to this destructive presidency. The Democrats, many Democrats who have been opposed to Trump for a long time, didn't vote for this, and they're not surprised, although perhaps the breadth and depths of the authoritarian blitz has been a surprise. But what we were trying to say also is that something like a third to half of Trump's voters in 2024 didn't vote for this either. They had in mind lower prices. They had in mind secure borders. Maybe they had in mind a war against wokeness. What they didn't have in mind was the way this presidency has turned out to be a revenge tour, a self-glorification exercise, and a corrupt effort to accumulate massive amounts of wealth. That's just the beginning. But if you go down the list, what you discover is that there's potentially a very broad coalition that can come together to reject this presidency in 2026 and 2028.
So, like you said, Trump told people, I think they thought they were getting strength, reform even.
The golden age. Yeah.
The golden
Whatever
age.
he always says. Yeah.
And instead they're getting, the tariffs, the war in Iran, but voters still, I think what you're getting at is like they want reform and revitalization. They want change, but that's not what they got. They got destruction and division instead. I'm sort of paraphrasing. I've read the book, and
I was going to say that sounds like a great formulation. I hope I wrote that.
Yes,
you did.
You did. But I think that's like what we have to, because I think that's part of what's going on even in these primaries where people. They want change, they want reform, they want revitalization, they're rejecting, and the division and destruction has been so over the top. I mean, something that they didn't expect, that they're kind of lashing out for that change, for that revitalization, for that reform, and they just want Democrats to answer that call. I mean, is that a fair way to put it?
I think so. I mean, I try to keep two ideas in my mind at the same time, which I don't think are that difficult, which is America's problems didn't start with Donald Trump. We've had an awful 21st century from 9/11 on. And we could go down the list of things of how our institutions had failed us, how our policies have not been adequate, So that even preceded Trump coming down the golden escalator. So that's one thing. But at the same time, this is a uniquely destructive presidency. There's nothing like it in American history. There's no precedent for it. We celebrate our 250th anniversary, but we came up 1 year short, basically. So those two things, I think, go together. And I think it's incumbent on candidates, I think it's incumbent on all of us who try to be in the political conversation to emphasize that, yeah, there are a lot of changes, a lot of reforms and revitalization that's needed. But we've seen now 18 months of destruction, some generational harm to our institutions. It'll take a long time to make up for this presidency, and we have to start immediately.
Well, we had a long time ago, one of the guys, Joe, I'm blanking on the name. I am the one with the senior moment today, which is kind of funny, but we had someone who had written the book on Steve Bannon and had a ton of access to Bannon and the whole, like, basically burn it down, burn everything you can down. And now, a couple of years later, we're talking, I think even a lot of the MAGA, quote unquote, coalition, a lot of these voters voted for this because they wanted something different than what was happening, shaking it up, draining the swamp. You mentioned going down the golden escalator. They wanted that shakeup, but to your point, not sure they wanted the true burn it down that, like, Trump and the coterie around him wanted. How do we, and I know you get into this, how do we draw that distinction with voters? And what is a message that needs to be, there's a big difference between actual change and just burning it down for the hell of it, because there's no plan after the fire right now.
Well, Alex, I think you make a very important point. I think there are a handful, not a large group, but a handful of true revolutionaries around Trump. I mean, Bannon is a self-proclaimed revolutionary. Certainly, Russell Vought at OMB is in that category. Stephen Miller's in that category. These are not people who are trying, RFK Jr. may be in that category. These are not people that are trying to make changes in our system and make it better. These are people who are saying, burn it down, basically. You don't need a government, to do these things that we have assigned to government. And I think most people would believe, if you go from the National Institute of Health to FEMA to, and go across the board to EPA to science, most people would believe we actually could have a better government, but we certainly need one. And this destruction is designed by people who say we don't need a government because what we need is for the handful of the wealthiest and most powerful people to run the country without any help from anyone else, without anyone being in the way. And I do think the other thing is that I don't believe that any of the Trump voters, or many of them, voted for this exercise in self-glorification and massive accumulation of wealth. I think that those are things, they want a president who's working for them, not for himself all the time.
Is it that, and I'm curious, Trippi, what you think too, but is it that they didn't, that part of it, the self-glorification and the making, $1.2 billion last year, was it that they didn't vote for that, or they didn't really care as long as the change was happening? And now the change isn't happening, so now they're mad about that too. Like, I feel like there's a distinction there.
Well, that's a fair question. I suppose I haven't fully faced it because the change is not only not happening, the destruction is happening on a large scale. Whether people would tolerate this massive corruption if they were seeing positive change, I don't know whether they would, but they don't have to make that choice because they've got both. They've got corruption and destruction and no positive change.
And so what's the, I mean, in the sense of betrayal, what do you think is driving it more? The economic damage, but also, I mean, the corruption, as you point out, the attacks on freedom, the damage it's doing to democracy. But there's so much kind of which I think comes from your work in the Senate and other folks who worked in the Senate who helped with the coalition and thinking through the book. There's so many things that they've done kind of sub rosa to white, doing so much damage to these departments that aren't even functional even anymore. And I'm not sure people understand the totality of the damage that's been done. Not, I mean, also, I mean, I think people are starting to understand the damage being done to our reputation as a nation around the world. But what is the I mean, there are signs that people are starting to wake up to how much damage is being done. But how would you put it? I mean, how do you calculate the damage and the destruction that's been wrought on our institutions, on departments, and our credibility around the world? And I guess that is, it has to be a massive coalition that rises up and says no more in November.
I mean, look, I think that you've done so many great campaigns, and there's no question that economic issues are always on the mind of everyone. Basically, cost of living and health care, those are always going to be crucial issues. I think candidates are going to be focusing on affordability, and I understand that. But when we looked at it, we said, well, that's true, but these other issues, the destruction of the rule of law, the trashing of our alliances and what we're doing to our national security, the gutting of the federal government, these are all, and basically the attacks on the press and media, and the upcoming, the attacks on election integrity, which have been central to Trump's rise and central to his hold on power and very fundamental to what's happening between now and November. All of these things matter. Somebody said to me, well, you're spreading yourself. The report goes in all these directions and covers a lot of things. And I say, yeah, because a lot of things matter. To some people, the desecration of the East Wing or the Kennedy Center matters a great deal. No one should miss the enormity of the moment, basically.
Yeah, your epilogue is, facing the crisis of our times. And I just wanted to there's one paragraph in it that I just think puts this all in perspective. It does talk about what you said about, the problems didn't begin with Donald Trump. But you state here, no one can deny that significant reforms will be needed to reduce inequality, broaden opportunities for our people, and rebuild our credibility and competitiveness in the world. But there is a vast difference between the reform and vitalization that our country needs and the destruction and division that this administration has wreaked. And instead of following the dictates of a would-be king, we should rely on the talents, creative energy, and common sense of the American people and the strength of our democratic institutions and values to meet the challenge of this singular moment. And I just think there's so much wisdom in that, in the epilogue about, and I think so much as a strategist, as somebody who's helping people run for office, there's a message in there that every Democrat that's the message that yeah, we need to not to protect the status quo or to go rebuild the old Department of Education, but to reform. The nation is in urgent need of renewal, of revitalization, and that's a big difference from the destruction and divisiveness of this administration. And that's the change you need to vote for in November. I mean, I think that's something that everybody who's listening should get this book, and get another copy to another activist or somebody that you care about, because and get it to the candidates out there, because I think there's so much wisdom and so much laying out why we were betrayed, and succinctly draws out everything that we did not vote for, including a lot of the MAGA supporters that were with him. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk that through with us about about we can overcome this, but it's going to take building that coalition.
Well, look, I appreciate what you read, and the fact that you value it. You've been through a lot of campaigns and kind of a legend in our circles, and so the fact that it matters to you is very important to me. I think I sometimes get asked, where's your positive program? And the answer, I think, is that you have to first understand the damage and stop it. And the positive program is going to emerge between now and 2028. The president who we nominate in 2028 is going to have to come forward with the vision and the policies that meet the moment then. But the first thing we need to know is that this has to be rejected. And that's what off-year elections are for, actually. They're as close as we have to a vote of confidence on the incumbent administration. When you have a wave election, it's because of the conclusion that the country draws, which is this isn't what we wanted. That's what happened, or has happened in past wave elections, off-year elections. That's what has to happen this time. We have to reject this presidency so emphatically that this is not going to be the first authoritarian. It has to be the last one who thinks he can be a king. So we have to reject it emphatically.
It is an interesting point you make there, but there's Joe and I have talked about this a lot, and Joe made exactly the point you just did about ultimately in 2028, whoever ends up being the Democratic presidential nominee will have the chance, but also just structurally the best opportunity to kind of reshape and reframe and describe and convince American voters of that positive message you mentioned. But and you mentioned midterms this year. We as a party, and I know Joe wants to get to some of the common sense solution stuff or coalition stuff. We as a party have this kind of faith that as long as you vote every 2 years, or like the election's going to fix everything, or every 4 years, and we put so much faith in the results of an election when it seems like the other side has been putting so much more into the systems, the judiciary, the rigging the rules, and making so regardless of what happens in an election, the attempt to hold power. So I kind of want to get to the what can we do besides just vote in November in the biggest numbers we can to repudiate this?
Alex, I think you put your finger on a point that we would all agree with, which is, I think, over a long period of time, the Republicans have outgunned us on a lot of things. And I'm thinking, of course, as we all are, of the off-year elections of 2010, when we not only lost 63 seats in the House, but that was when we were losing the state legislatures around the country, which led to, essentially the reapportionment of the Congress, et cetera. They've done a good job in pursuing their goals with single-minded focus. And certainly in the judiciary area, that's been true. we have to do the best we can to match that with a kind of focus that we haven't had before. And I will say, and for you and Joe, but for me, this is hard to say, but there's no doubt that Trump's victory in 2024 was partly because of the Democratic debacle, where the Democrats, for a long period of time, seemed to think they could nominate Joe Biden, even though no one in the country thought he should be president for 5 more years. So in a sense, we were punished for the Democratic debacle. We'll move on from that, and we'll have new leaders and we'll have new ideas, but we have to pursue economic reform and political reform in a very hard-nosed way.
Yeah, and that's sort of the thing. I think the book, there's urgency. We need an emergency response to this, to get everybody, it really does have to be a massive uprising in November, for lack of a better way of putting it. I mean, where it's so overwhelming that the different things that the Trump and his and his administration will do to gum up the works of the election, challenge it, call it a hoax, and take on the results. And I'm at least starting to see that, particularly with independents and others. I mean, it's not just a partisan thing. It's starting to look like a broad swath of Americans, including some Republicans, are starting to get there.
Well, look, I'm not a fan of Tucker Carlson, but I certainly think it's helpful that Tucker Carlson and before that, Marjorie Taylor Greene feel that they've been betrayed,
right,
or think that they made mistakes. I mean, to acknowledge, right, as they both have, that they made mistakes in judging Trump and what he's doing. I think that's important. I think the cracks there are starting to show. The independents who are looking at this in a fair-minded way are overwhelmingly against what they're seeing. So there's a possibility of putting this together. But as you and I have discussed before, while his approval ratings may be declining, that doesn't mean he and his friends won't try to govern with whatever they've got and become even more determined to hang on to power at all costs. And what the scenarios for the election, and you've spent a lot of time thinking about this, is going to be a very difficult period.
Yeah, and that's why I want to get into the Common Sense Coalition and where people can get more information and go to, the website and other things. And also, at the end of your book, you do have the Citizens Handbook, which at least gives 4 or 5, 6 things that people should start focusing on as citizens that they can participate in. And so for our listeners and those who may be watching this on YouTube, I wanted to give you, to have you tell us a little bit about the Common Sense Coalition, what you do there, and what citizens can do to help shut this down.
Well, the coalition, we call it the Common Sense Coalition. It was actually just the group of contributors who came together to write this book. And they were respected, dare I say it, veteran or senior leaders in various sectors, from national security to law, business, health, education, and climate. So we had people that covered the waterfront in that regard. In terms of, and I want to emphasize, and you know this, but I just want to emphasize there's an extraordinary effort being made by a number of groups that I'm extremely impressed with, like Indivisible, and protect our democracy, keep our republic.
Yeah,
you go
keep our
down the
republic
list,
was one I
there's
was going to give a shout out.
tremendous number of people at work already. What we've said is that everybody can do something. Whether it's talking to your neighbors, writing letter to your congressman, making sure you vote, volunteering to be election judges, which is not as easy as it used to be. Everyone can do something. But I think it's crucial that, and for us, doing the assessment of the damage was the thing that we were trying to do, and then trying to explain to people just how much damage is being done, and to persuade them that they can reverse this. They can begin reversing this.
Yeah, no, the book, I just think it's, chapter after chapter on what we didn't vote for, what the damage and destruction has been done, and is a rallying cry to the American people, I think, of why we all have to join together and stop it first, and then reform and revitalize and understand that it's not about protecting the status quo, which I think is part of what happened to Biden and Harris and the Democrats in the 2024 campaign. We were seen as people, things were really broken, and we were so against what Trump wanted to do that we were seen as protecting the broken system that wasn't working for people, and he took full advantage of that. And I think in this election, Democrats need to make the case. Yes, things are wrong. They didn't start with Trump. They need to be addressed. The urgency is even higher, and we've got to reform and revitalize. But to do that, we've got to stop the destruction and the divisiveness, and the grab just for power and profit that this administration, Trump, that's all Trump is after. So look, I'll give you the last word, Ira, because we're running out of time here. But I wanted to. I really can't tell people. This is like one of the most important reads I've had. A lot of work went into this. It makes the case, but I mean, literally makes the case for not just why Democrats but why MAGA, why a lot of people, very few people voted for what Trump and the administration are delivering, and why we need to all rise and build a coalition together to stop it in November. Ira, I'll give you the last word, and then I'll sign us out.
Not sure I can improve on your last word, Joe. I'm very grateful for the chance to be with you. I think the enormity of the moment and the challenge that we face right now, there have been only a few periods in American history that are this consequential. So everyone has to devote themselves in one way or another to stopping this destruction and beginning the rebuild.
Thanks, Ira. And that's something that Alex and I have been talking about. One of the things that everybody can do is find one more person, one more friend, one more family member, one more coworker, and get them to understand the destruction and why we have to stand together. And so, that there, as you said, people can't do everything, but you can do something. I think the book is something that people should read and distribute and get out there to more and more people, because I think it lays out exactly how important, how pivotal this moment is. And like you said, it goes. There's only a few moments in our history that match the urgency of this moment. And so
I should say we called ourselves the Common Sense Coalition. Nothing can match Thomas Paine's revolutionary pamphlet, but that was our model, and we tried to keep the book short and price it low. So we're trying to maximize readers, not revenues or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it's short, it makes the case like none other I've read. I mean, in a succinct way, that I think can get, we've all got to start talking to each other again, because that's something that Trump's made sure we aren't doing. And I think sharing some of the information in this book with your friends and neighbors, and urging people to join a common sense coalition in November, that's determined to revitalize and reform the country to work for everybody is something all of us can do. So thanks, Ira, for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for listening to or watching That Trippi Show. Make sure to join us at sez.us. It's a civil social network for people, not bots or algorithms. This podcast will always be free and is part of Lincoln Square, so check out the latest at lincolnsquare.media. And if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next one. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a review on iTunes. So we'll see you next week. Thanks, Ira. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Alex.